Hello, my name is Hanna Gorschelnik. I'm glad to be able to talk to you today on the topic of collective bargaining in the field of freelance professions. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm going to talk about this topic from the point of view of Finnish subtitlers and tell you about our experiences of collective bargaining in the subtitling profession. I work as the executive director of a Finnish trade union association called Kieliasiantuntijat in Finnish and language experts in English. When I first started in this position 15 years ago, I never imagined that subtitlers could and would bargain collectively. People were just too scattered around in the field. Most of them worked as freelancers and didn't talk with each other about contracts and money. But little did I know, first in 2009 and then in 2012, two major outsourcing events occurred, and 1/3 of the Finnish subtitles were left unemployed or just decided to leave the business. This is where our path in collective bargaining in the subtitling field started. My own background is in translation. My working languages were English and French, which means I'm not a lawyer, but I do know the legislation through my job. At the start of my talk, I'll tell you a little about our association to give you an idea of what it does and what our goals are. After that, I'll look at collective bargaining in Finland on a general level. I'll talk about who can negotiate with whom and what the negotiations require. I'll tell you how the first collective agreement in the subtitling field was negotiated and what the process demanded. I'll also discuss how the subtitling profession has changed since the first collective agreement. Finally, I'll assess what the future of collective bargaining looks like. Is it a relic of the past, as many employers claim? In Finland, there is a long tradition of membership of a trade union, but the overall level of union membership is now falling. Nevertheless, around 70% of Finnish employees belong to a trade union, and the unions are an important part of how our society functions. Trade unions play a significant role in building the Finnish world of work and labor legislation. Language Experts is a professional association of language professionals working in multilingual communication, languages, translation, and interpretation. We have around 2,500 members, of whom around 25% are translators in various fields. Language Experts is a unique trade union association on a global scale, as we unite language experts from all language fields. Seldom are translators in various fields, spoken and sign language interpreters, terminologists, editors, localizers, technical writers, and other language experts, all members of the same association. This makes us the strongest influencer in the language field in Finland. We are an unusual trade union association in Finland, as we bring together employees, freelancers, solo self-employed people, and students of languages and cultures. The fact that we stand up for all language experts, regardless of the sector their employees operate in or the format they work in, is unique. This diversity gives us a broad overview of the entire language industry and its significance for society. Our goal is to make the language industry and language professionals visible. People outside the industry do not see that language professionals work in many different sectors, in many different jobs, and that they are needed in positions that enable processes such as international trade and non-discriminatory accessible society. Our daily work consists of advocacy and advising and supporting our members. For example, we lobby for changes to legislation and try to influence Finnish government policy. We're involved in developing education of future language professionals, and we help public authorities conduct better language service procurement. We do research to gather information about language professionals' working life, and we write instructions and guides. For example, we have been a co-author of quality recommendations for both subtitles and TV and video closed captions. We also provide our members with courses and networking opportunities. What's more, we educate students about working life and contracts. Generally, trade unions are party to many collective agreements, but our collective agreement on subtitling is at present the only collective agreement of ours that concerns translation. Because translation has long since been a global industry, companies have been unwilling to sign collective agreements. The low level of union membership among freelancers has also made collective bargaining difficult. Over the past decade, subtitles in Finland have been increasingly rapidly switching from regular employment to self-employment. New entrants to the translation market are offered contracts as entrepreneurs, and employment contracts are starting to be rare. Many subtitlers have the obligation and responsibilities of entrepreneurs, but not the commensurate freedom to agree on their rates. Contractual terms have weakened from year to year, but not just in Finland, also globally. However, this doesn't mean that subtitles work could not be done in the form of regular employment. Indeed, as an association, we have lobbied for a change to legislation to prevent work done as regular employment from being camouflaged as self-employment. In other words, if a subtitler is dependent on his or her client and in practice cannot negotiate things like rates, he or she would be considered an employee, not self-employed, as now is the case. In Finland, there are two main forms of performing work. Work is done either as an employee or as a self-employed person. Many subtitlers work as freelancers, but even then they are either employees or self-employed. There is no third category in between employee and the self-employed in Finland, nor do the trade unions want to create one, despite some recent proposals to that effect. In our view, a third category would not provide any further clarity. Instead, it would only create problems when interpreting what format the work is performed in. In Finland, only employees can negotiate as a group about terms and wages with their employer. Our goal is an amendment to competition law to enable the solo self-employed to negotiate collectively about their employment terms and thus achieve a fairer position in relation to their clients. At present, Finnish competition law prevents business owners of all sizes, including sole traders, from bargaining collectively. Such agreements are considered cartels. However, EU legislation would appear to allow some kind of agreement for sole traders. As to my knowledge, such bargaining occurs in some EU member states. Generally, the parties to collective bargaining are an association representing employees on the other hand, and an employer representative on the other. For an association to represent employees in such bargaining, it has to count enough of people affected by the bargaining as members. That means an association can't negotiate on an agreement if not enough subtitlers are trade union members. Subtitlers in Finland are members of 2 trade unions, which means 2 unions have taken part in negotiations. In addition to us language experts, subtitlers may be members of the Union of Journalists in Finland. If subtitlers are not unionized, they have to conduct negotiations independently. Subtitlers in regular employment can elect a representative to negotiate on their behalf, but subtitlers who are not employees have to negotiate on their contracts individually. Collective bargaining takes time, effort, and expertise. And this is why it is generally the task of trade unions. A collective agreement may apply to a particular company, companies, or a whole sector. If a contract is to affect the whole sector, the companies at the table must employ at least half of the employees in the sector. In addition, over half of the employees in the sector must be members of a trade union, or in our case, 2 trade unions. Our subtitles collective agreement was negotiated directly with the companies that are party to it, without an employer confederation, and it only applies to these signatory companies. In addition, the agreement only applies to employees, albeit including freelancers with employment contracts. The collective agreement is a public document, and it is available, for instance, on the language experts website. The agreement covers salary and pay rises, but also many other important issues for subtitlers, such as gathering and communicating information to copyright organizations for the payment of royalties. In addition, the agreement contains a recommendation on a weekly pace of work for freelancers to prevent agencies from demanding an inhuman pace. As I already mentioned, the collective agreement for subtitles was a product of a crisis. In 2009, TV channel Nelonen Media tendered out its subtitling. The tender was awarded to the then Broadcast Text International, which had made a very low offer. The result of the tender left around 20% of Finnish subtitlers out of work, as the subtitles didn't want to switch to working for BTI due to its poor contractual terms. The subtitles launched a massive campaign for a collective agreement in the industry to prevent the constant downward pressure on salaries and rates. And an agreement was indeed reached, but with just one single Finnish agency. BTI refused to come to the table. Another larger and deep crisis erupted in 2012 when another large media company, MTV3, sold its subtitling operations to BTI. BTI was once again invited to the negotiation table, but once again, it refused. As a result, over 100 subtitlers who were transferred to BTI quit, and some even changed professions because they refused to engage with BTI's price dumping. In addition, some subcontractors refused to work for BTI. At that time, there were around 300 professional subtitlers in Finland. So this was huge. BTI tried to recruit more subtitlers, but the unions announced a job application blockage, meaning they forbade their members from applying to work for the agency. Students were also warned about dangers of applying to work for BTI. The solidarity of the whole sector, including students, was decisive. BTI's reputation in clients' eyes also began to suffer, and in 2014, BTI finally signed the collective agreement. However, VTI considered the level of rates in the agreement far too high and eventually, over time, sacked its regular employee subtitles. Instead, it offered self-employment contracts with a lower level of rates than in the collective agreement. Since 2014, the agreement has been renewed 3 times and a total of 4 agencies have been included in the agreement. During that time, VTI has ceased providing employment contracts to freelancers and now buys subtitling work only from self-employed subcontractors. From the very start, we made efforts to include all freelancers, most recently 3 years ago in 2019. That attempt was also unsuccessful, as the legislation or the prevailing interpretation of it did not allow it, but we got to discuss the matter with both the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Employment and the Finnish Competition and Consumer Authority. That in itself was progress. Even though the agreement doesn't apply to all subtitlers, it has been useful in many ways. It serves as a guide for self-employed subtitlers. It tells them what issues are agreed with employers and what contractual terms are worth pursuing. A self-employed person can add his or her expenses to the salary in the agreement to calculate a benchmark for rates. The agreement has aimed to slow down the cuts in rates and reduce the use of poor contractual terms. I know that the agreement doesn't solve all problems, but it has been one of the many tools for achieving improvements in the industry. The agreement has also brought the unions and agencies closer together. We have many shared goals regarding the development of the industry. Our dialogue during collective bargaining has been natural and continual. As recently as November, we talked about the way machine translation affects the development of the industry in Finland. Above all, we need contact between subtitlers and agencies. We have to make together ourselves and our profession seen and heard so we can achieve improvements to agreements on a global scale. At present, the future of the collective agreement is unclear. In 2020, BTI was sold to Ayuno, and in 2021, last year, Ayuno bought SDI Media, the other international agency operating in Finland. Now, the parties to the subtitlers collective agreement are the huge global agency Ayuno SDI Group and 3 small local companies whose translation volumes and market positions are totally different to Ayuno's. Ayuno SDI Group knows that it has the dominant position in negotiations, which it is going to use in the upcoming collective bargaining this spring. In addition, the group of subtitlers covered by the collective agreement has grown even smaller. The number of regular employees is small, and Ayuno SDI Group no longer has any freelancers that would be covered by the agreement. Even though the force of the collective agreement is wearing off, I see hope in the future, as the EU has woken up to the weak position of the self-employed on the labour market. The European Commission announced in its 2021 work programme that it is drafting guidelines to examine the terms and limitations on which the self-employed could be granted a collective bargaining right. The guidelines aim at preventing EU competition law from banning solo self-employed people from negotiating collectively on their contractual terms. This would ensure a more level in negotiating table between solo self-employed people and their clients. The issue is currently open to public consultation and will be until 24th of February. After that, the Commission will approve the guidelines. The guidelines will bind the Commission in future when it interprets EU competition rules and oversees how they are implemented. When the guidelines are approved, it will be easier for us to lobby for amendments to national legislation. The Commission has also issued a proposal for a directive on improving working conditions in platform work. It lists criteria for determining whether a digital platform is an employer. If a platform is considered an employer, people doing work on that platform would enjoy the labor and social rights that come with the status of worker, including collective bargaining. The question is, could subtitling companies be interpreted as platforms? The Commission's proposal for a directive on improving working conditions in platform work will now be discussed by the European Parliament and the Council. Once adopted, Member States will have 2 years to transpose the directive into national law. I think the European Commission's initiative is necessary to achieve changes in freelancers' status in Finland and the entire EU, and to grant solo self-employed people the right to collective bargaining. That right would add a new meaning and dimension to the subtitler's collective agreement. That right would also make the functioning of the whole translation industry healthier. In conclusion, I would like to stress that because the subtitling industry is global, what we do in each country has a huge significance for the whole industry. Every individual has an impact on the entire system and vice versa. We're in this together. That's why it's important for subtitlers to unite and bring their problems to unions for resolution. Only together we can change the situation and end the downward spiral of rates and contractual terms. Thank you for listening.